Professor Lumumba, welcome to Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much.
It is such an honor and a privilege to be the first one to interview you in Zimbabwe. You are arguably one of the most recognized speakers against corruption in Africa. What would you say are generally the three major impediments to fighting corruption?
Africa is a continent in crisis. And the crisis has been brought about by many things, but one of the most debilitating things is corruption. And corruption has become cancerous in Africa because of a number of reasons. The first one is the absence of political will. The second one is that Africans want to get things that require effort without making any effort. And the third thing is that political office has become the greatest site for accumulation of wealth, with the consequence that every African wants to join politics to acquire wealth without working for it. As long as we have those problems, corruption will always have its pride of place in Africa.
Do you believe, in your own view, that the African youth can play a significant role in the fight against corruption?
Not can. The African youth must play a critical role in the fight against corruption and bad governance. Throughout the ages and throughout all civilizations, it is young men and women who have participated and brought changes, whether it was the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the struggle for independence in Africa, the civil rights movement in Africa, and much more recently, the Arab Spring. The thing that ignited the Arab Spring, which started in Tunisia, was a young man who came out and was championing the interests of younger people. And we saw the fall of the government in Tunisia. We saw the fall of the government in Egypt. Unfortunately, the gains that were made after the Arab Spring are now being lost because the initiative and the momentum was not kept alive. So African young men and women must rise and participate in the struggle to change Africa. In any event, it is the young people who stand to reap the fruits of good governance.
In your view, what is it that the youth as individuals should do so as to contribute meaningfully to the general cause of combating corruption?
At an individual level, every young man and woman must take a solemn vow that I will not participate or engage in any activity which is equal to corruption or which amounts to corruption. But what an individual can do at the individual level must be aggregated by forming movements. It is only through unity that you can challenge the status quo and ensure that the ills that are being perpetrated, particularly by the political class, are addressed and tackled effectively. So it is individual action aggregated into common collective action which translates into a movement which then informs the political process and brings about meaningful change. And this is not an easy thing. History has demonstrated that blood will flow as you begin to question the political order. And young men and women must be prepared to do that for the sake of this country and many others.
Do you believe the results are better achieved if we pursue engagement or confrontation? Which of the two can get us to the promised land?
My own view is that engagement is always to be preferred. If you can act with the firmness that opens the eyes of the political leadership, rather than with the arrogance that inflames their anger, then you are in a much better place. But it also presupposes that those in positions of power are willing to engage. Any method which is confrontational must be a method of last resort. It is only when all else has failed that you use instruments of last resort.
Most recently, Prof, you have highlighted the need to build on the blocks. In other words, that is, in my view, focusing on the bright spots. Can you expand on that? What you meant?
You know, what I mean is that Africa is known for negative things. We still are referred to as the dark continent. We still are referred to as the scourge on the conscience of the world and humanity. But there are few things that are beginning to happen in different corners of Africa. And therefore it is important to begin to highlight this, even as we talk about the negatives. Let us talk about the good things that are happening in a number of African countries, the good things that are being done in Botswana, the positive things that are happening in Rwanda, the good things that are happening in Tanzania, and a number of other African countries. That is important so that it may be demonstrated both to ourselves and the world that we can achieve certain things if we take the right decision. It doesn't require outsiders to tell us what to do. President Magufuli of Tanzania has come up in a manner that is positive, and we are beginning to see the fruits. But the fruits will not come out instantaneously. There will be moments of pain, moments of waiting. But Africa can't do it, and Africa must begin to do it for herself.
Many citizens across Africa labor under this misconception that governments should be the ones to fight corruption, to combat corruption. What is your comment on that?
That is completely misguided. The government must provide leadership in the fight against corruption. But government cannot police everyone. In other words, it is the duty of the government and the duty of political leadership to create an environment which allows for citizens to fight corruption. At an individual level, at institutional level, it is the concerted effort of all that ensures that corruption is fought effectively. If you look at countries such as Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, the governments have created such an environment so that laws are there to be followed. And if you don't follow the law, you are punished. So anybody who sits in their house and thinks that there is an animal called the government, which is going to devour a monster called corruption, is deluding himself or herself. All of us have a role to play, but the primary role of leadership is with those in leadership, because we pay taxes so that institutions may be created, that institutions may be facilitated, so that those who don't follow the law are punished in accordance with the law. But all of us have a role to play.
And finally, coming closer to home, Zimbabwe, what is your advice going forward to the Zimbabwean people in the fight against corruption?
Zimbabwe is a country that has potential, but potential is only potential. My own view is that the political leadership must come to the realization that if corruption is not fought and fought effectively, then Zimbabwe will never realize her potential. The dividends of independence will never be realized, and that it is important that we must match our word with our deeds. Individuals who engage in corruption when they are in government, they must be punished and be made to pay. And the public must also be averse to corruption. We must not celebrate thieves. The problem in Africa is that the African electorate and the African population celebrate thieves and corrupt individuals. As long as we do that, then people will occupy public office, and the next thing they do is that they steal from public coffers in the belief that that is the way they sustain themselves in political power. But once again, the solution is one and the same. As long as the political class are not in the forefront, at the vanguard, in the struggle against corruption, then Zimbabwe will never realize her potential. Zimbabweans only need to realize when they wanted to remove the administration of Ian Smith, they were united in purpose. They identified a common enemy. The new enemy now is corruption. They must fight it with the enthusiasm and the zeal with which they fought that administration. And lo and behold, if they do that, Zimbabwe will be a great country.
There you heard it, straight from the horse's mouth. The fight against corruption requires a shared and collective responsibility, which should see you and I actively participating in, and we should not look up to the government and expect government to do it alone. There is no government in the world that has ever managed to fight corruption on its own without the active support and participation of its citizens and other stakeholders. Thank you very much, Professor, for affording us this exclusive interview.
God bless.
And can you promise the Zimbabwean youth that in the near future you will be coming back specifically to speak to the Zimbabwean youth?
Yes, indeed. My desire now is that we should find men and women of like mind moving across Africa, spreading the message that corruption is a cancer that must be fought. And if Zimbabwe is going to be the place where we launch that message, I will be willing to be a participant in that initiative.